stylization of the film is all about the character Deadpool. He has a skewed view on reality, but it's not affecting the way other people view reality.
The douchebag does think you're dead, right?
Yeah.
That's good. You should keep it that way.
What, like wear a mask?
Yes, a very thick mask, all the time.
This is the movie in which he builds the suit for the first time, puts the swords on, straps on guns, and becomes this kind of crazed, comedic, wisecracking character.
Tell me where your fucking boss is, or you're gonna die in 5 minutes!
Deadpool costume is something that is vitally important to this character. I mean, it's one of the most recognizable superhero costumes.
The Deadpool look in the comics is very gritty and visceral. We researched all the various designs of Deadpool. Some of the costume designs are way too simple, some that are just way over the top. So we just had to find something that worked in the real world.
When you're talking about a superhero suit, it can go terribly wrong, which we reference a few examples of.
It's something that Ryan and Tim and everybody took incredibly seriously. And having the authenticity and the fine detail was crucial.
We had about 10 weeks to create the suit from scratch, and that includes finalizing the design, making all the choices for fabric and color and details, all the layering of the suit, and then we sculpt in clay and or 3D model on the computer. Then you have to make molds and cast parts and do lots of samples to get everything looking right. And then, of course, fabricating the costume itself.
There was a sort of dual process happening, which was on the one hand, we were building this super cool red superhero suit. On the other hand, we were making it look dirtier, uglier, the opposite of what you would normally do with a superhero costume.
Finding the right red, that was pretty huge. It's tricky because what looks good in person is not always right for camera. And because we're in the day of social media and fans taking pictures everywhere, it has to look good on set. For post-production, if the color's muted already, it's very difficult to make it bright enough. So we had to come up with something in between that worked really good. We dye the fabric a certain color, and then when we print on top of it, it changes the whole tone of the color. So it's not a specific hue, it's just Deadpool red.
Is the mask muffling my voice?
It's all about the hero shot, right? So the mask was extremely crucial for us. We started sculpting the mask even before we were awarded the project. It was that important to me to get that right because that's everything. And the shape of the eyes, getting that expression in a static mask was super important. That in-your-face, aggressive, look out, here I am kind of thing. That's him, that's Deadpool. We digitally scan Ryan and start with his head, and then we sculpt on top of that.
The mask is pretty important because there's a ton of dialogue that's underneath the mask.
There's so many little subtle things, how tall the head is, how skinny the jawline is, the shape of the eyes, that's all huge. So we sculpt that in clay, and then we digitize that, scan it, and 3D print it. And then from there, you make the parts that are underneath, and you make the fabric suit. So you have sculptors, mold makers, 3D modeling people, costume fabricators, so it's a big process. We have to build things in there so that he can breathe and the sweat isn't causing a problem. All those things were a concern. This is one of the Deadpool masks, completely finished out. We created it so that the eye pieces can come out separately. There's a release mechanism button in the back. Push it, pull the eyes. And we have different types of eyes for specific stunts that you can see better through. Get more air, and you can exchange them on the fly. We knew from the get-go that he was gonna have to be extremely mobile. Huge stunts, parkour flips, and all this craziness. So from the very beginning, it had to be stretch fabrics. And so the trick is to create stretch fabrics that don't look like a yoga suit, spandex. Ryan's suit, basically hero suit, fits him perfectly. There were two main stunt guys on the film. One guy was more for like the hard hits and the flying and that kind of thing. And another one who did gymnastics and parkour flipping. So they each had their specific suits. For the stunts, the suit has contained within it pouches, basically, so you can put pads in specific areas, protection for your elbows and knees and that kind of thing.
We took great pains to conceal it from the world so that we could unveil it with an incredible bearskin rug photo.
I hope the fans go in and they're blown away by how cool and aggressive the suit is, and then I hope they forget about it and just watch the movie and enjoy it.
So fucking gnarly.
This character's in a shame spiral. He's been hideously deformed. He's covered head to toe in scars. He's kind of hideous to look at.
The disfigured version of Wade was hugely important and really hard to nail.
Deadpool is portrayed as everything from like slightly scarred to massively mutated, rotting corpse when he pulls off the mask, dripping skin and huge holes in his head. And of course, we had the fine line to walk where we had Ryan Reynolds.
Is that someone else to show I'm coming, King?
What have you done to me?
You need to make him disfigured enough that it motivates the whole back half of the movie where he's just trying to actually get his face back in many ways. But you don't want to make him so grotesque that the audience can't look at him. So it's this really tricky balance of making it tragic, but not too grotesque.
We did multiple full makeup tests and designs, trying to come up with not just a guy who's scarred or disfigured, but a character, because you want to create something that fans are going to want to make themselves up as, a poster on the wall or makeup kit for Halloween.
When he's first transformed, it's at its worst and bubbling and disgusting, and then it settles into that scarred face.
It's this raw, kind of enhanced version of what he will later become, which is great, fun, because it gives us a transition.
I am sorry, you are haunting. Your face is the stuff of nightmares.
Like a testicle with teeth.
It's a series of silicone prosthetics to retain a lot of Ryan. It's a very thin prosthetic. There's like 10 on his head. And I wanted to keep a very translucent quality to it. So there's a lot of light really affects it, just like skin, where you could maybe see the muscles and blood and the tissue underneath.
Well, it feels super weird where you just sit there.
When Ryan is in the Deadpool makeup, he comes in and the first thing we do is glue all his hair down and we put like a little cap on him to cover like the bulk of his hair on top. And then what I do is I paint an entire, almost like a musculature and skull structure on his own skin, because every little detail that I put underneath shows through to the surface. And I have a team of guys helping me hours ahead of time, painting all these pieces to make them look really amazing. And then when we put them on Ryan, 90% of the job is done. You're just kind of gluing it all on, and then you kind of tie it all together just to get him into his head. It's like a 3-hour process. When you get into the full body, you're talking about like 7 hours. It's a long process. Luckily, we don't have to do it too many times.
Someone's not counting. 6.
The great thing about an R rating is it gives you a little bit more freedom. You don't have to really hold back, and you can show what needs to be shown. That being said, there are movies that are like bloody for bloody's sake. This is not that. It's more about the humor.
Really? Rolling up the sleeves?
He's killing and stabbing people. It's happening so quick. You're more concentrating on him and what he's doing than the after effects. Look, bottom line is I want the fans to be happy. I want Tim to be happy. I want Ryan to be happy. But you want the fans who love this stuff. I want to hear them go like, wow, that's really cool.
For a second there, it felt like we were 3 mini lion robots coming together to form one super robot.
Part of the comic that people love and I've always loved is that he references pop culture. He is like a aficionado of pop music, movies, TV, other comic books, his own comic book. And that was something that was really important to all of us to capture in the film.
Deadpool has kind of like a unlimited pop culture canon at his disposal at any moment. And I think that's what makes him interesting for me.
Don't make the same mistakes I did. Got it? Yeah. Or else the whole world tastes like Mama June after hot yoga.
There's not a specific rule about what are the things that he refers to. They are just things that just feel like Deadpool.
Nice to see you, Jared. I'll take a foot long.
He loves and hates pretty much everything, and it's a huge part of the way he sees the world and the way he speaks about the world.
And that is why, in my opinion, the movie Cocoon is pure pornography.
From the very beginning, Tim had some strong ideas about how he wanted to see Deadpool's world, and he wanted to stay away from the usual superhero comics where they've always been kind of slick and glossy and hyper-tech and very hyper-stylized.
In our initial discussions, Tim and I said that it was very important that it felt like this world that Deadpool lives in is this sort of grimy, overcast environment.
Instead of having to build these really big elaborate sets, we just sort of went into the downtrodden, industrial, gritty parts of Vancouver and made it sort of fit the story that we're trying to tell.
When it comes time to licking wounds, there's no place like home. Deadpool's apartment should be on hoarders, you know, because he's got everything in there.
Deadpool's lair was interesting. It was an extension of his character. He had to kind of represent who he was, what kind of went on in his mind, in his psyche, and kind of represent his kind of dual nature.
It's a little bit like Wade himself. It's overcrowded with tchotchkes, almost like his brain exploded onto the walls.
I would maybe describe it as crack house chic.
Which is like a really cool little like apartment shithole somewhere. It's like a lot of like old WWE characters showing up here and there. A lot of guns, a lot of ammo. It's a pretty cool set.
I was going to spend the night assembling the Borgia, but this is holding my interest.
I told you, we're going with the Urdvash, not the Bjorsha. Get it through your head or get out of fucktown.
We thought it was a really fun idea to play with this idea of IKEA being furniture you have to build, and a blind woman building it is even funnier.
Let's face it, I have trouble with IKEA furniture trying to put it together, because you always wind up with either 3 screws that, why do I have 3 screws? I'm supposed to use all these screws, or you don't have enough screws.
There's a few different kind of key locations for the film. There's Sister Margaret's, which is a local bar kind of establishment that mainly deals with mercenaries and other kind of ne'er-do-wells that inhabit this world.
The drinks are not on Wade. Use the money for sex, not for friendship.
Sister Margaret's was actually a very difficult location. We were trying to find a traditional dive bar, biker hangout, and we had a hard time in Vancouver trying to find that kind of place. So we ended up finding kind of a modern, hip joint that we really had to take down a few notches.
We have the workshop, which is the quote-unquote hospital that Wade ends up in when he's dying of cancer and thinks he's going there to be rehabilitated or given help, but in fact that's where he's tortured.
Tim was not interested in doing the high-tech scientific laboratory. He thought this would be kind of a rogue operation. It'd be something that was ad hoc and put together from bits and pieces. So these guys would have found a abandoned warehouse somewhere with no electricity and brought what they needed to make it work.
This place seems sanitary.
My first request is warmer hands. Oh, Jesus. A warmer table.
We found an old warehouse in Vancouver that we turned into even more distressed and run down and dirty. The exact opposite of a clean hospital, the kind of place you wouldn't want to go for any kind of health care.
It's so funny, everybody walks on set and is like, wow, it's really gloomy in there. And I walk on set, me and Ed, we're like, oh, this is our home.
There's the strip club. Of course there's a strip club, which was an amazing day. It was just a bunch of nude girls all day long walking around. They're really not shy.
For the first time really on this film, I'm very happy.
The fun thing about it was after scouting the location, Tim thought, well, why don't we just keep it as it is? So this actually is the real location used with its real name, with the actual bartender and the actual girls.
The scrapyard where a huge battle takes place.
In the script, it was described as a shipwrecking yard. Tim drew inspiration from the shipbreakers in Malaysia, and he went something very big in scale. We had a hard time finding an actual location that had all the elements that Tim wanted. So we ended up finding a lifting yard that we end up bringing all our own scrap to. What we end up doing is I'm bringing 30 truckloads of scrap, boats and planes and helicopters and buses, and we end up creatively organizing them, trying to build them up and make it look like an actual junkyard.
There's a realism to the film, something that was important to Tim, and I think helps differentiate the film from maybe more sort of poetic, stylized versions of superheroes.
I want it to be believable. I want people to feel like they're watching a real story. To me, that allows me as a viewer to identify with the characters in the film. And I think that's the way this movie is handled.